Hey, thanks for stopping by. Today we got a fun project. Not too long ago, I had a customer that requested some taco stands out of acrylic. I had never made these, and once I got them done and delivered, they were just a lot of fun to make and a great idea. Something perfect for a beginner and that's useful. This is what they look like. Made out of acrylic. This is green glass cast acrylic. We're going to talk a little bit about the different types of acrylic here in just a minute. But in this video, what we're going to do is we're going to take it from start to finish all the way through so you can see how this project's done. One of the things that would be helpful is if you have the ability to go ahead and generate your designs. A lot of times you might have a customer come along that wants something done and you don't find a pattern on the internet. You really need to have the ability to make your own. And in my mind, I'd rather make my own and make it unique anyway. And that way your customers are getting something completely different. So this is a great video if you haven't done any designs of your own yet to kind of get you started. It's not hard to do, and I figured this kind of a project is fun because when you're all done, you can use it when you have your tacos, and it will teach you a lot for basic design concepts. A little bit about the material that we're using today. There are two types of acrylic. There's extruded acrylic, which is about $4 a square foot. And it cuts beautifully. It's typically readily available in a lot of places. And there's cast acrylic. Cast acrylic is about $8 a square foot, or about twice as expensive, but it engraves so much better than extruded acrylic. So depending on your use will depend on which one you really need to use. If you're just building some taco stands and you're not going to engrave anything on them, extruded acrylic is perfect for that. It gives you a beautiful edge, and it's fairly inexpensive compared to cast. If you have something like a medallion and you're going to engrave something on it where the engraving is the central focus, you definitely want to use cast acrylic. It provides a much brighter white engraving, and it just looks better, but it is quite a bit more expensive. Today we're going to use some glass green 1/8" cast acrylic. I really like the way this stuff looks, and I just thought it would be fun to use. So let's go ahead and jump into LightBurn. I'm going to take you step by step from start to finish, and let's see what we can make. Okay, to get this project started, I'll give you a tour of what I got going on here, and then I'll show you what we need to get laid out to do our design. The very first thing that we're going to have to do is to make sure that our snap to objects is on. And how you determine that is you come up here to these little gears right here, you click on that icon and come down here to snap to objects, and this radio button needs to be green. It needs to be turned on. And what this does is this will make one object snap to another, and that will help us in our design. It'll simplify things for us. So we'll say okay. So the way I've got this designed is these over here on the left hand side of your screen are just drawing guides. They are going to help us draw this design that we're going to end up with for our taco stand. And you'll see if you take this in small parts, this is going to be real easy to do. So the first thing that we're going to need to do is we're going to need to make rectangles. So if you needed to make a rectangle, you could draw it out. If it's the wrong color, you can always come down here and select the right layer, and it will make it the right layer. So go ahead and draw your rectangle, select your layer, and then if it's not the correct size, make sure that it's highlighted, come up here to the width and height, and type in the measurements that I've got for our drawing guides. So we need, these three drawing guides are going to be for the upright portion of the taco stand, this section right here. And these down below are going to be for the base of the taco stand. So just generate this rectangle that's 1 inch wide by 1/2 inch tall. And then we need two other drawing guides that are 1/4 inch wide by 3 1/4 inches tall. And we need two of those. We need a couple of drawing guides for the base of the taco stand, and they're 3 inches wide by 3/4 inches tall. And these are going to be drawing guides that we're going to use here in just a minute. Then we're going to go ahead and start to design our taco stand. So the first thing that we want to make sure that we do is we draw a 3/4 inch circle and make sure that it's associated with the red layer. The next rectangle that we need to draw is a 2 1/8 inch by 1.6 inch rectangle, and that's for this section right here. We're just going to draw a rectangle by these dimensions. We're going to draw another red layer rectangle that's 2.5 inches wide by 3.5 inches tall, and that's going to be for the start of this base for our taco stand. And the last but certainly not least, we need to make some of these slots right here. So we're going to make 2 more rectangles that are a 1/2 inch wide, and then the height is the material thickness. Now we're using 1/8 inch cast acrylic, and if you measure it with a caliper, I'll show you a picture here, it measures 0.11 of an inch. And so that's what these are laid out. That's where I got that 0.11. So let's say that you wanted to make these in 1/4 inch acrylic instead of 1/8 inch because maybe you didn't have any 1/8 inch available. This would be 0.25 or whatever the actual measurement is for thickness on your material with your calipers. And we need 2 of those. Once we have those components and drawing guides, it's going to be real quick before we get our end result. So let's go ahead. I'm going to clean this workspace up a little bit, and we'll go ahead and get this design done. Okay, I've cleaned up the design space a little bit, and we're going to go ahead and we're going to start to take these design guides, put them over here to eventually generate the upright of our taco stand. And if you break this down into simple shapes, it's going to be a lot easier than you think it will be. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and take this 1 inch by 1/2 an inch rectangle, and I'm going to make sure that my selection tool is on. I'm going to grab it by the bottom of it, and I'm going to snap it right to the bottom. Doesn't have to be in the middle, but it should snap right to the middle if you have your object snaps on. Then what we're going to do is we're going to come up here to the red circle. We're going to come up here, and we're going to move down here. We're going to get it just in the box. We'll zoom in, and we're going to take that and snap it so it snaps to this line here. And then what we're going to do is we're going to hold down the Shift key and select the rectangle and use the center align tool so I can make sure that this circle is right in the middle of our rectangle. This box down here was just merely a way to get it a 1/2 an inch off the bottom. Okay? Now, we're done with this design guide. We can go ahead and get rid of it. We're going to come back here, and we're going to grab this left design guide and snap it to the left side of the rectangle. We're going to grab the right-hand side of this design guide and drag it over and snap it so it hits to the right-hand side of this rectangle. The lengths of these don't have to be lined up. As long as we have them sticking out the bottom here, that's really all we care about. Then we're going to come up here to one of these little tabs that we made, and we're going to grab it. And we're just going to get it close here. We're going to zoom in, and what we want to do is we want to get it to the cursor so it's round and like a target. And then what we're going to want to do is, excuse me, snap it right to the edge so it's perfectly in this corner. Okay. Then we're going to go get the other one. Snap there. Snaps right in that corner. There we go. Now we've got our little tabs that are sticking out. Okay. Okay, so you can see that these drawing guides that we snap to the sides of these rectangles were merely a way to make sure that we had each one of these tabs a quarter of an inch off of each side so they're uniform. That's the only reason we use these drawing guides. The next thing we're going to do is we've got this rectangle, we've got this rectangle, and we want to weld them together to give us these little tabs down here. And what's important is that you want to make sure that these small rectangles here are perfectly lined up with this line here, otherwise it won't weld. And that's why your snapping features are so important. So the way we do that is we're going to go ahead and select this rectangle, hold down your Shift key, hold down this rectangle, select the big rectangle, and then we're going to come over here to the weld tool. And what will happen is it will eliminate those lines on the tops of those small rectangles. So if I push the weld tool, now you'll notice that these lines that we're coming across here are gone. They look like this. And at this point, we've got a rectangle with some tabs. Now, for some reason, you push the weld tool and it either deletes a big portion of your design or it's not giving your result as you expect. Check to make sure that one rectangle is exactly over the other rectangle. If it's not touching, it won't weld it the outside shape like this. So just make sure that your snapping is on and that you do as much as you can to make sure that things are lined up. So now we've got this rectangle with these tabs, and now we've got to create this feature here. And it's a lot easier than you think it might be. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to deselect our, and we're going to come up here to the pencil tool. We're going to make sure that the red layer is selected because we want to continue with the layer that we're currently working with. And the first couple of things that we're going to want to do is, this is a circle right now. And so I'm going to go to the Select Shape tool, and I'm just going to select the circle. Now this is where the node editing comes in handy. If you know how to node edit, you can do all kinds of neat things with very little effort. So the first rule of node editing is that you cannot node edit a shape. It has to be converted to a path. Right now, if I went over to my node edit tool, there is no nodes to edit. But if I come up here and say convert to a path, now you see that there's nodes to be edited, and I can do all kinds of things with this circle. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come up here, and I want to make sure that I can see my nodes in my rectangle. I can see my nodes in my circle. And now I'm going to go ahead and draw some lines and do some node editing. Go back to the pencil tool. Make sure you're on red layer. I'm going to start right at this intersection here, and you can see that with this drawing guide here, it's going to tell me when I'm at the intersection of where this drawing guide is and where the edge of this rectangle is. And as soon as it turns into a crosshair, click your mouse once, and that will start your line. Then I'm going to come down here, and I'm just going to zoom in on this and get it to where it's close. I'm going to click there, and then I'm going to right mouse click to turn off the pen tool. Then I'm going to do exactly the same thing over here. I'm going to go from here, zoom in here, just to where it kind of runs in to each other right there. Okay. Now, what I need to do in order to get rid of this part of the circle that we've drawn is I need to install or insert some nodes. And in order to do that, I've got to be in the node editing tool. And if you hover over where those two lines intersect, this circle and where the end of this line is, you'll get a crosshair. I'm going to push the I on the keyboard, and it's going to insert a node right there. I'm going to come over here and do the same thing. I for insert. Now I have the ability, since I've got these basically connected to this lower portion of this circle, I can go ahead and hover over this portion of my line and hit the D key and delete those sections. Go back to my circle, select this, delete it, and now I've got this part of my taco stand done. The next thing I'm going to do is come up here and go back into node editing, and I'm going to insert some nodes right here. One here, type the I key. Now I've got a node between here and here, which means if I hover over here and hit the delete key, now I've basically got my design for the upright of the taco stand. All I have to do is go ahead and get rid of these drawing guides, and we'll put some radiuses on this particular setup, and our upright on our taco stand will be complete. Okay, now that we're done node editing the upright portion of this taco stand, there's one thing that we've got to do before we can add the radiuses on this piece. If I tried to use the radius tool right now, it wouldn't work, because when I click on this, you can see that this is not a continuous line. It's two different lines. It's two separated lines. And so what we have to do is we have to join these two lines to make it one continuous line, similar to what you see here. If I select it here, you can see that all of the line is selected. In order to do that, we've got to go ahead and select the entire line and come up here to Edit and say Auto Join Selected Shapes. Alt-J is the shortcut. And now, if it worked, I should be able to select any part of this line, and it's going to select all of the line. And once you do that, then you should be able to go ahead and move to the radius tool. But if your radius tool is not working, it's probably because it's not a continuous line. Okay, if we look back on what we needed to do here, we're going to add a 0.10 inch radius on this corner and this corner. So we'll do that next. So what we'll do is we'll come down here, we'll select our radius tool, we'll put in 0.10 and hit the tab key. Okay, so we've selected our shape, we've activated our radius tool, we put in 0.10, and we're going to come up here, and if it's going to work, you're going to see that that will turn into a radius indicator. So if I double click that, it gives me my radius. Double click that, double click that, double click that, and now we've got our radiuses. I'm going to go ahead and get out of that. The other thing that I always do anytime anytime I have tabs like this that are going to go into a piece of acrylic, I always radius these outside corners. It makes it a lot easier to assemble. And if you don't, if you keep this real sharp corner right here, chances are when they're pulling this piece in and out of that flat piece of acrylic, this little corner has a tendency to chip off or break off. So if you just put a very slight radius in these tab corners, number one, it makes it a lot easier to assemble. They go in smoother and you won't have any broken pieces. So I believe that radius was going to be 0.008 on this bottom. So what we're going to do is we're going to come back and activate our radius tool and key in 008 and hit tab. Come down here and just get rid of those corners. And now you see these aren't quite as sharp. And this piece right here is ready to go. Okay, for this next section, we're going to speed up just a little bit. We're going to go ahead and get our base made. And so we're going to come down here to our drawing guides for our base, and it's 3 inches wide by 3/4 inches tall. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to snap one to the bottom and one to the top. The only thing this is doing is I drew a couple of extra rectangles here that are 1/2 inch wide by 0.1 inches high. And I'm going to go ahead and center this particular upright on this box. And so that way we can have a way to place our sockets that go basically into the base of our taco stand. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to select my upright and my taco stand base, and I want to make sure that they're centered. So you can see now that this taco stand is directly in the middle of this base. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take one of these and I'm going to snap it to the middle there. Take another one of these and snap it to the middle there. And you can see that these are lined up now. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to group these. So I select them both and come up here and group. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to come down here and I'm going to hold down the Shift, Control, and arrow up until that one is 3/4 of an inch away. I'm going to duplicate, right mouse click and duplicate and arrow down. And zoom in. Right there. And now I can get rid of these drawing guides. Now these 4 holes are set. What we'll need to do is we'll need to go ahead and create a 1/2 inch radius. On here, we come down here to our radius tool, we type in 0.50, tab, and add these radiuses. Our base is done. Come back to our select tool. We'll right mouse click this and say duplicate. We'll arrow down and come up here to the mirror tool and we'll vertically mirror it. Move this one down a little bit. we've got ourselves a design for our taco stand. Now, if we wanted a letter to be engraved in here, again, you'll see that it snaps right in the center. Okay, anytime you're engraving on acrylic, you want to reverse or mirror the image because you want to engrave it on the back side so you're looking through the acrylic to your design. So we're going to go ahead and flip this or mirror this horizontally. Kind of looks funny the way it is, but it turns out nice. And at this point, we've got our design done. So let's just talk a little bit about settings. I've got my engraved setting at fill at 350 millimeters per second at 20% power. This is for a 60-watt machine. We're talking 15 millimeters a second at 60% power for both of these. These could have both been red, and in this case they are. I just drew it a different color here just for illustration purposes, but it certainly could be the same color. And so you always want your engrave on top because that's what's going to go first. So if we were going to look at this, if we're going to preview this, we could scrub through this preview, and the first thing you want to make sure of is that the engraving is first, and then it cuts out the middle, and away we go. Minute 54 seconds. Couple of things to remember when you're cutting acrylic is you use very little air as possible for both cutting and engraving. This is vastly different than if you were cutting like wood where you want lots and lots of air. The more air you put on acrylic, the worse the cut becomes. The only thing you have to be careful of is flame up. So you've got to be right with your laser when you're cutting with acrylic. Don't ever leave your laser when you're cutting acrylic, because if you don't have enough air, you can get a flame started. So use just enough air to get the job done for both engraving and cutting. I leave the craft backing on until you're ready to assemble. It just protects the product and it makes it look a lot nicer when you're done. And then I lightly sand the edges of these little tabs right here, just right here and right here on the sides. And it just breaks that very sharp edge off, and it makes the assembly go much better. And there you have it. You've just designed yourself a taco stand. One other thing that I'll mention is once you have your design done, and maybe you've actually cut these pieces out of acrylic, and you go to fit this upright piece into this base, and these tabs won't fit into, or maybe they're too big, they're too sloppy. One thing that you will have to do is you'll have to play with your kerf setting. It's right here under, once you open your layer, right under common, right down here where it says kerf offset. Mine is 0.001 for it to fit not too tight, but nice and snug so you don't have a lot of wiggle in the parts. You're just going to have to play with it a little bit on your kerf offset. So each machine is different, so I can't tell you what yours would be. Once you get it dialed in, though, it should be pretty consistent with most of the acrylics that you're going to use. It will be different from what you would use in your wood settings. Now that we've got our design done, we need to go ahead and load our 1/8 inch cast acrylic in our laser. One of the things that I always try to do when I'm cutting acrylic is stand it off the honeycomb. Either use the knife blades underneath the honeycomb or get it off the honeycomb, because what will happen is when the laser hits these sharp edges, there's a little bit of a flash, and you'll see that in your acrylic. It's not as bad as if you leave the paper on, but I just like to go ahead and just use some pins, stand this up. It doesn't have to be very tall, but I always stand my acrylic up off of the cutting surface. So we're going to go ahead and load that in there. And so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put these pins right at the very edge of this acrylic. And then we'll go ahead and focus the machine, set the origin, and go ahead and cut this out. Okay, I've got the file loaded in the laser. We're going to frame it right quick just to make sure everything's all set. Looks like we're a little bit close on that one side, so I'm just going to move everything over just a little bit. We'll frame it again. Let's move it over just a little bit more. There we go. All right, let's get it cut out. Okay, we got it all cut out. We'll lift this away. Take a look at this. This will just blow out with the compressor, get rid of all that dust, and then we'll go ahead and peel these off and see what it looks like. Okay, we got the paper backing peeled off the supports and the stand, and you can see how nice that looks. The engraving is on the back side. Everything fits. One thing that I like to do is on these little tabs right here, first of all I round off the corners just a little bit in the design, and then I take a piece of sandpaper and just take that real sharp edge off of those tabs, and they fit a lot better into these sockets if you do that. So a couple of things when you're working with acrylic, I usually leave the craft paper on till the very last minute. It just protects the product. This stuff does scratch fairly easy, and you can polish it out, but it's just one more thing to do. So leave your craft paper on. One thing that you might need to do if you leave your craft paper on when you're cutting it out and when you're engraving is you might have to increase your engraving power just a little bit to get through the paper and into the acrylic. So just keep that in mind. Just like that. Love it when it snaps in like that. Now, once you get these skills down like this, you can go ahead and make doubles. This is the size that my client wanted. They work great. What a fun project. Well, as you can see, once you go through that process, it's pretty straightforward. The good thing about that is you can build on your skills from what you've learned today, and you can make all kinds of things. You can go ahead and grow your taco stand, put a little saying in between. The sky's the limit when it comes to that kind of stuff. You can make it out of extruded acrylic instead of cast acrylic. Cheaper way to go. This comes in many, many different colors. A lot of fun. You can start to inlay one color into another color with acrylic. Once you get used to learning how to work acrylic and do your own designs, it's pretty much left up to your imagination on what you can create. And that's what I like about it, is whatever you can come up with, you can actually make that happen. And that's what your customers like too. I hope you got something out of today's training. As always, if you'd please like and subscribe, I'd really appreciate it. Until next time, have a great day.